As the girl surfed the waves, she came across a horrifying sight: a whale carcass drifting on the surface, its body ravaged by large bite marks. It seemed to have been attacked by some massive predator. Suddenly, the seagulls feeding on the carcass took flight as if sensing danger. Nancy instinctively ducked for cover but accidentally fell into the water. Unbeknownst to her, a huge shadow swiftly passed beneath the surface. Seeing the frightened seagulls circling above, Nancy realized this place was not safe. She quickly swam towards the shore. Just then, a huge wave surged in. She sprang onto her surfboard, hoping to ride the wave back to land, unaware that the shadow was hidden within it. Nancy lost her balance and fell into the water. The waves tossed her about uncontrollably, tearing the surfboard from her ankle and slamming her into the rocks. Struggling to stabilize herself, she fought her way back to the surface and swam desperately towards her board. As soon as she grabbed the board, a powerful force dragged her underwater. Blood quickly tainted the surrounding sea. A great white shark had clamped down on her thigh. Driven by survival instincts, Nancy fought back, kicking the shark with her other leg. Just as she was about to lose consciousness, she broke free from the shark's jaws and burst through the surface. The intense pain forced a scream from her, but there was no time to catch her breath. She had to find safety immediately. Reaching the shore seemed impossible, so Nancy turned back towards the whale carcass. Not far away, while the shark chased close behind, she accelerated, reaching the carcass only to find its slippery surface offered no grip. She clung desperately to a wound left by the seagulls and slowly hoisted herself up. Just in time, she crawled onto the carcass moments before the shark arrived. Exhausted, Nancy lay on the whale's back, gasping for air, only to notice the wound on her thigh was still bleeding profusely. She quickly untied the cord from her ankle and wrapped it tightly around her upper thigh to prevent herself from going into shock from blood loss. The searing pain nearly made her pass out, but when she lifted her head, she saw a glimmer of hope. Two surfers were preparing to leave the beach. Nancy stood up and shouted for help. The car stopped, and Nancy thought they had seen her, but the surfers were only organizing their gear before driving off without a glance back at the shore. Her desperate cries faded as they disappeared from view. Worse still, the clever shark refused to leave. It began nudging the whale carcass, trying to push Nancy off. Realizing it wasn't safe anymore, she scanned the area for a better option. The shore and the buoy were too far, and the shark would never give her time to swim there. The nearby rocky outcrop seemed like the only chance. With the shark circling back, Nancy made a split-second decision to dive into the water. To her shock, the enormous whale was tossed into the air by the shark. Seizing the moment before she was noticed, Nancy swam forward with all her might. Despite the stinging pain in her leg, she finally reached the rocks. Climbing up and peering over the edge to check for the shark, it was nowhere in sight. But Nancy, battered and bruised, struggled to stand, hoping for a passing boat or a lingering beachgoer. But all that accompanied her lonely silhouette was a seagull. Just as stranded as she was, exhausted, she lay on the rocks, trying to rest. But the splashing waves woke her with a start. Her wound continued to bleed, and she needed to act fast. Nancy took off the pendant from around her neck, cleaned it in the water, and, gritting her teeth, used it to stitch her wound closed.
The suture.
Afterward, she tore off her jacket, using it to wrap the injury tightly, and elevated her leg to slow the bleeding. Unknowingly, she drifted into unconsciousness. Night fell, and the chill awakened her. She removed the jacket from her leg to cover herself for warmth. Her thigh was turning purple, forcing her to loosen the cord to allow circulation before tightening it again with a sleeve she tore from the jacket. Amid her bad luck, a small crab tried to nip at her. Frustrated, Nancy slapped it away, and hunger drove her to eat it, though it was barely edible. Spotting her surfboard floating nearby, she cautiously re-entered the water, intending to paddle back to shore. But halfway there, the relentless shark appeared, forcing her to retreat to the rocks. In her haste, her leg wound worsened again. Despair hit when she saw a figure lying on the beach. Nancy cried out for help. The man, a drunken beachgoer, finally noticed her and waved cheerfully. Nancy's hope reignited as she directed him to her bag with a phone inside to call for help. He even turned off his phone directly and put it in his waist pocket, and then put a stack of cash in as well. Nancy's pleas went unanswered as he made a mocking goodbye gesture. The man's greed got the better of him when he noticed the surfboard and attempted to retrieve it. Despite Nancy's warning about the shark, he went into the water. Moments later, he was dragged under, reappearing on the beach missing his lower half. At dawn, Nancy awoke to see two boys surfing nearby. Thinking she was hallucinating, she soon recognized them as the ones from the previous day. Unaware of the lurking shark, they didn't take Nancy's frantic shouts seriously. The two surfers quickly responded, but they had no idea Nancy was in danger, nor did they believe there was a shark in the water, even as Nancy screamed herself hoarse, trying to warn them. As a huge wave approached, Nancy's fears came true. One of the boys was just about to turn when the shark attacked him. His friend's face turned pale with terror, and he desperately paddled toward Nancy. Seeing this, Nancy prepared to assist, but the shark quickly devoured the boy, dragging him back into the water. A piece of broken surfboard suddenly shot out of the sea, followed by the boy who struggled to the rocks. Nancy rushed to help, but the shark still had its jaws clamped on him. With just her strength, Nancy couldn't pull him free, and in the end, the boy couldn't escape his grim fate. Having lost hope of rescue once more, Nancy sank into despair as the shark continued to lurk menacingly in the water. The tide was rising, and soon the rocks would no longer be safe. She had to find a way to save herself. Then she saw the camera that had fallen from one of the boys, and she decided to retrieve it. Judging by the shark's speed, she estimated it would take about 32 seconds for it to swim from the whale carcass to the rocks. Once the shark reached the whale, she timed her dive into the water. She had to retrieve the camera and get back in that time frame, or else her life would be in serious danger. But plans rarely go smoothly. As she reached for the camera, the waves battered her repeatedly, causing her to miss several attempts and waste precious time. Finally, she grabbed it just as the shark lunged at her. Thankfully, the rocks provided cover, and the shark didn't get its prize. Nancy seized the opportunity to scramble back onto the rocks with the camera. She began reviewing the footage and found it had recorded the entire sequence of events, from the boys' descent into the water to their tragic end. She also saw that the shark appeared to have been injured by something, but with less than 10 minutes before the tide submerged the rocks, Nancy had to make her way to the nearby buoy, about 30 to 40 meters away. Swimming there would take at least a minute. It was an extremely dangerous challenge. Nancy recorded a video on the camera, explaining her dire situation and leaving a few words for her family. Then she tossed the camera into the sea, praying someone would find it as a signal for help, just in case things went wrong. After leaving her final message, Nancy used the broken surfboard to send the seagull away, hoping it would escape the peril. By now, the water was nearly covering the rocks, and the shark was ready for its meal. As Nancy prepared to act, she noticed that a swarm of poisonous jellyfish had drifted into her path. Observant as ever, Nancy realized that the shark seemed to avoid the jellyfish, and this might be her chance to swim past. Without hesitation, Nancy dove into the water, heading straight for the jellyfish swarm. Just as she had hoped, the pursuing shark was blocked by the jellyfish, but Nancy was also stunned several times. Despite the pain, she pressed forward, seizing the chance to swim toward the buoy, but the shark circled around the jellyfish and resumed the chase. Luckily, Nancy reached the buoy just in time, grabbing onto the ladder to climb up. The shark rammed the buoy at that moment, and the old, rusty ladder broke off in her hands. Thinking it was the end, Nancy managed to stab the shark with a metal rod before climbing up to safety. However, the shark wasn't ready to give up its prey so easily. Nancy used the buoy to shield herself from another lethal strike and quickly ducked inside to take cover. After catching her breath, she spotted a ship in the distance. It was her only chance at rescue. Nancy hurriedly opened a nearby metal box, where such buoys usually kept a signal flare, but the flare had fallen into the water. She grabbed the flare gun and retrieved one flare from the sea, loading it into the gun and firing. Unfortunately, it was a dud. Watching the ship drift farther away, Nancy clung to the buoy and braved the risk of the shark to retrieve the remaining 3 flares, quickly firing another. This time, the flare shot into the sky successfully, but an island blocked her signal, and the ship continued on. Unaware of her distress, Nancy let out a helpless cry as the ship vanished from sight. She slumped down, losing all hope. Unbeknownst to her, a little boy playing with a ball on shore had found the camera washed up on the beach. After viewing its contents, he quickly left the beach, seemingly to seek help from his parents. Meanwhile, the shark became more aggressive, continuously attacking the buoy and snapping one of its chains. Nancy quickly stood up and fired the flare gun, hitting the shark's body, but it only made the predator angrier. A series of fierce strikes rocked the buoy, and Nancy clung to it tightly to avoid falling off. Seeing the shark retreat momentarily, she climbed to a higher spot to observe its movements, hoping for an opportunity to use the last flare. That's when she noticed an area of the sea stained with whale oil, with the shark swimming within it. She decided to pull the trigger. The wounded shark dove underwater, now completely maddened, and suddenly leaped out, biting onto the buoy. The force snapped the second chain, causing the buoy to tip over and submerge. As the shark charged again, Nancy ducked inside the buoy's metal framework for shelter, but she underestimated the shark's strength. The rusted bars snapped as the shark bit through them, with the metal frame no longer offering safety. Nancy needed to act fast. She glanced down to the seafloor and spotted steel bars anchoring the buoy. With one remaining chain, she devised a bold plan. At that moment, the shark launched its final attack. As it approached, Nancy dove out of the frame, swung to the other side, and grabbed the last chain. The broken chain, like an unrestrained beast, dragged Nancy rapidly toward the seabed. The shark missed its target and immediately turned to pursue her, unaware that Nancy had been waiting for this moment. As the shark drew closer, Nancy aimed for the steel bars below. In an instant, the shark was impaled by multiple rods. Seeing the shark motionless, Nancy finally let out a sigh of relief, but soon she felt short of breath, until she was completely engulfed by the upraised sediment. Moments later, the boy who had found the camera returned with his father, and an unconscious Nancy was washed ashore by the waves. The father hurriedly dragged her to safety and administered CPR. Nancy soon regained consciousness. She weakly lifted her head to look out at the terrifying sea, realizing she was finally rescued. To her surprise, the seagull she had saved was alive and well. Years later, Nancy returned to the same beach. The scar on her thigh remained a vivid reminder of her ordeal. Gazing at the waters that had nearly claimed her life, Nancy felt a rush of mixed emotions, but this time, she was not alone, but accompanied by her family as they faced their fears together. She took her younger sister by the hand, grabbed their surfboards, and, with her father watching, they once again charged into the sea. Although the vast sea would always be filled with countless unknown dangers, the spirit of adventure and exploration would never be extinguished.